Hi, everyone. Karen Holly back from the Women's Health Panel, Women's Abundance, now better known as Menopause.life. I am super excited today to have someone from the MedTech industry with us. Not only is she an amazing person, but Tracy MacNeal, hi, Tracy,
Hello.
is the CEO of Materna Medical, and she has a plethora of experience in the pharma industry, diagnostics, digital health, and medical devices. She's been in that space for over 20 years. She got her MBA from Duke. She's a chemical engineer. She's a healthcare executive. And again, she specializes in medical devices. And so today I was really excited to have her on because, as you know, we've had multiple pelvic health specialists or PT pelvic health specialists on this channel. And we know that there is a huge amount of injuries that can occur during vaginal births for women. And so I thought we could focus a lot today with Tracy telling us a little bit more about how the medical industry has changed through technology and new innovations that really support pelvic health with women. So if you are about to have a baby, or your daughter's about to have a baby, or you have a friend who's about to have a baby, you definitely want to listen in to this interview today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tracy.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much. It's such a joy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. So Tracy, why don't we start with, how did you get started? What is Materna Medical? What do they do? And how did you go from being a chemical engineer into medical devices?
Well, I have four teenagers, and they're all, in high school and going into college, and they're all concerned about what to major in and what's going to happen. And I just tell them what I'll tell you, which is that, just start and things will happen. Say yes when people ask you to do projects. That's mostly the answer. I started out of engineering school with Merck in pharma. In manufacturing, though, not in sales or marketing. I mean, like the hard hat, the boots, launching, multi-ton processes in pharma all over the world. It was super fun and interesting. And then, just found my way to medical devices about 10 years in, and really enjoyed that pivot. I think medical devices they're more tangible, right? And sometimes ethically less complex. Pharma is a complicated industry, to say the least, but I was really grateful for my time there. But have been working in medical devices now for about 12, 13 years. And this is my second medical device startup. My first was a company that was in orthopedics. So this is my first go around in women's health, and it's absolutely a thrill. So I'm happy to share more about that, but I'll pause.
Oh, I'm thrilled. And you all, I should also let you know, as you know, I'm a huge women's health advocate, and love entrepreneurial information as well. And Tracy and I were speaking earlier, and she is also the national chair for the Women's Executive Network. And so she is a big advocate of women entrepreneurs. So Tracy, why don't we start with Millie? And
Hmm.
maybe you can show women and talk about, let's kind of step back and talk about the risks associated with vaginal births on the pelvic floor injury space, and what you've learned over your course of working in the women's space, women's health space.
Yeah. Well, maybe just stepping back a little bit. I think that so again, so actually I didn't really answer your question. How did I get to Materna? The board recruited me. I'm not the founder of Materna. It was founded by an incredible bunch of people who got these products where they were when I took over about a little over a year and a half ago. The board asked me to come on board and take these products to market, which is really what I specialize in. And maybe I feel like my journey is not unusual, that I had never heard of some of these issues. And it took me a while, and I'm a kind of a visual person. I had to like map out what the issues are in pelvic floor disorders. I had them all confused. I didn't know why people would need Kegel exercisers. And so maybe I can just talk a little bit about that,
I would
about,
love that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Because
So
the audience also doesn't know. I mean, I've been, well, we both know that pelvic health in this country is a little bit late to the game. And women have not been getting the support up front that they need because they haven't been aware of it, primarily because women's health studies are further behind men. So, yeah, set the ground on what are all the different types of things that can be impacted.
yeah, yeah. So maybe we can think about it like Goldilocks, right? So there's a too tight and too loose. And what we are trying to do at Materna is help whatever's going on, have it be just right. So I think the most commonly understood problems are in the too loose category. So when women have babies vaginally, I think they know, all moms know that they don't want to tear, right? The perineal tear. And 90% of us do. Most of the time, it's not a big deal, but up to 20% of the time, it's really quite a big deal and requires surgery and can have a long recovery or long and expensive recovery. But, and I think everybody understands not wanting to tear. But what I don't think women realize as commonly is that the pelvic floor is almost like a seat belt where your organs go through them. There's like these muscles that hold all your organs in place. And then as the baby goes through the birth canal, those muscles can separate from the bone. And actually I can show with an ultrasound. I'm going to share my screen just briefly because sometimes it's just easier to show it than to describe it.
Mhm.
So this, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So these are ultrasounds of the same patient before and after childbirth. So this is the bone here, and this is the muscle that we are trying to protect. And here you can see after she's given birth, she's been injured. That muscle has come separated from the bone. And here you can see the urethra doesn't have the support that it needs, and the organs are falling out of place. This is what incontinence and prolapse looks like measured quantitatively.
Hmm.
And so that seat belt of muscles is something that I don't think most women really think about before they're giving birth. They know they don't want to tear, but they don't know about this thing. And I'm often asked, why didn't my doctor tell me? Right. So up to 25% of the time in the year postpartum, women will experience incontinence. Sometimes they can get better with physical therapy, but the numbers are closer to 50% by the time we're 55. 50% of women will have these injuries by the time we're 55. And we're 9 times more likely to have these injuries if we've given birth vaginally. So, what I think a lot of folks think about in terms of, I'll stop sharing. What I think a lot of folks think about in terms of pelvic floor stuff is that it's like it's too loose. That there are a lot of technologies trying to help with that. One of the questions I had coming to this from orthopedics was like, well, why don't we just stitch it back up? I mean, there's a rotator cuff surgery where you stitch the thing back to the bone. I mean, if sever your Achilles tendon, they can stitch it back together. Why can't we stitch this back together? And what I learned is that you need to immobilize that kind of tissue if you're going to let it heal. So, you'll put your shoulder in a sling for 6 weeks. You
Hmm.
put your foot in a boot, but you can't do that with your pelvic floor. It's just impossible to immobilize in the same way. And it's holding up the entire weight of your trunk. So if you think about a cough,
Yeah.
or sneeze, right? So it's very, very difficult to repair these injuries. So prevention is really what we're on about. So I'll get to our technology in a sec, but when we think about the sort of the landscape, so the too loose side, things in that technology, those technologies would be things like like lasers, trying to tighten up tissue. It would be Kegel exercisers, and it would be pelvic mesh surgeries,
Hmm.
things to kind of make things tighter. And actually, we're none of those things. We're trying to prevent those injuries to begin with. So I can talk more about that in a sec. But the other, I think, much less understood part of the pelvic floor landscape is where it's too tight, and it's an incredibly common condition. Um, it's basically that the pelvic floor is in a circle. If you think about those muscles, they're kind of in a circle. So the way I relate to this condition is that I get the Quasimodo neck, like my neck gets too tight. I go to physical therapy and I can stretch this back out because it crosses a joint.
Hmm.
Pelvic floor doesn't. It's in a circle. So when it gets that kind of chronic contraction, involuntary mind-body problem,
Mhm.
the only way to stretch those muscles back out is passively. And so it manifests these. So about half this population is menopausal. So
Mhm.
very much in your space, Karen. And thank you again for the work that you do. Very, very important. About a quarter of the market is cancer survivors. So when women have breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, a lot of times radiation is delivered vaginally.
Mhm.
Doesn't that sound like fun?
Mhm.
And chemotherapy drugs can put women in a sudden menopause. So they end up with all the same issues. And those symptoms are essentially that the tissue is drier and thinner and sex hurts. And
Right.
so when women begin avoiding sex because it hurts, what they really don't realize is that it begins to shrink.
Right.
Right. So the New York Times actually had an article on this last year. I mean, it is getting out there, the incredible shrinking vagina.
Right.
It's got this a variety of names. It can be vaginismus or vulvodynia or GPPPD. Anyway, a
Right.
lot of names that women do not relate to at all.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and it's so interesting, Tracy, because I mean, I know for a fact when I was forced into surgical menopause, it does get tighter. And actually, I had a reaction where half of that circular set of muscles just stayed tight because it hadn't recovered from the trauma of the surgery of having everything taken away. And
exactly.
so I had to have massage, like you said, passive massage to try and like slowly help the pelvic floor muscles ease up.
Yep.
And then we also interviewed Dr. Sherry Ross, who you may know.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and we showed the audience the dilators that she has created for Shiology, and just the size differentials, and just, the smallest one was the size of my pinky. And I wish I had remembered to bring them here, but I know you're going to show your products or the devices as well. But women, it's hard to believe. I think a lot of women find it hard to believe that that hole could become as small as your pinky finger or as small as your thumb finger just because of lack of use.
I've seen photos of women where it's completely closed up.
Yeah.
Older patients where just surgically needs to be opened back up again. It can be the size of a pencil. It really does. It is a use it or lose it part of our bodies.
Right.
So keeping it healthy, and it's difficult because women don't talk about it. And a lot of OBGYNs aren't trained, especially in menopause, these things. And so if women, and I think girls from a really young age are taught not to talk about anything down there, right? It doesn't even have a polite name.
Right. They say down there. Well, that's our job, right? That's why we're doing these
That's
interviews,
why we're doing this.
is to and and I'm so grateful that companies like yours and others that are doing and creating these devices to help prevent on the vaginal birth side, and then also be available on the menopause side, or even like you said, cancer recovery side. Because the more we get the word out there, if one person has a friend and they tell a friend and they tell a friend,
Mhm.
then we'll start to change women's health.
Exactly right. Yep. So yeah, so maybe I can share my screen again when talking about the too tight.
Right.
Um, the standard of care you mentioned, let me know if, can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah, the
Perfect.
standard of care is these, what we call static dilators.
Mhm.
I guess as a MedTech engineer, I have to say I was pretty surprised when I saw this,
Mhm.
that this is the standard of care for women who have pain and anxiety on penetration.
Mhm.
That the therapy is essentially to jam different sizes in.
Mhm.
And what we find is that women deeply dislike these products.
Right, right.
Um, they take, our scientific advisory board, and I would say that that puts us apart from a lot of the some of the other companies in women's health. There's a lot of consumer products out there. I think that it's it's incredibly important work to get the products to women, however you can get them to them.
Mhm.
But I think that the lack of clinical data has been a real problem for patients and their clinicians, right? So what Millie is, just to say what it's a very simple device. This is what Millie looks like. She's very petite. And like you say, starts about your pinky finger size, 15 millimeters, and goes up to 40 millimeters, and it expands inside. So the patient is in control of it. It's a little electromechanical little thing where you just press up and down. I don't know if this Millie's charged. Yeah. So she just decides when she's ready to expand 1 more millimeter. And because she doesn't have to keep taking it out, and it's in this discrete case, it just, you can put it on your bedside, and it's not quite as embarrassing. It's got a little USB charger, right? So way less trouble to clean also. So it's just a better product, I think. And women who've used both, we've got the only published clinical data on dilators in this space, and I'd love to share those results if I could.
I would love you to. And while you're pulling those up, I mean, so everyone, the big difference of what you saw on the left, and that was similar to what Dr. Sherry showed, Dr. Ross showed, is that the Millie is patient controlled, right? So the woman can be like, oh, okay, I feel like I can, that's not painful. I'm going to stretch a little more today, or I'm going to stretch even a little more today, instead of having to take them in and out and go, oh, yep, that doesn't feel too tight, right? So it's
right.
one
Oh, and
product.
Millie vibrates, which
Oh,
was interesting because as a medical device company, our board was like, well, I don't know, should we have it vibrate? I mean, maybe we don't want to be perceived as a sex toy, but our clinicians were all really clear with us that it has to vibrate, that there's just decades of data in physical therapy to show that vibration really helps reset nerve endings and helps patients break through the plateaus. If you think about, TENS units and massage, like you mentioned, it really does help to sort of shake it up a little bit. And what we find most of our patients do is they'll get to the point where it's like the good stretch, and then they'll use the vibration to break through to the next level of the plateau. And our clinicians just say that women make much faster progress with Millie, and adherence is a lot better. The thing that I want to share that I find really sad, and this is small font, so I apologize for that, but this is some of our published data that on average, women have been suffering this tall pole for 5 years. Women have been in
wow.
suffering 3 to 5, 2 years, a long time
Right.
that women have been dealing with this. And how many clinicians have they seen? 3, 4, 5, 6 or more.
Right. Right. Well,
So
and this is now, right? Think about back in our Mother's Day. I mean, there was nothing available at all. So these are game changers. And it's why it's so important for us to get to the 20 and 30 somethings, because those are the people, those I think the standard deviation of births is, in the 20s, late 20s and 30s. So
exactly. Yeah. So, but that said, within 6 months of Millie use, 86% of those that were unable to have intercourse, they could return to intercourse.
yeah.
So it's a very treatable condition. So essentially, Millie is like physical therapy in the too tight side of the spectrum.
Right.
So that's Millie, and maybe I'll stop sharing. So that was our first product to launch, and then our second product for, as you mentioned, women in the childbearing years is PrEP. So this is PrEP. I've got my glasses here so you can kind of see that that's about how big it is. This is about the size of a quarter. This is the baby bumper. So you can kind of see in there, this is our IP, it's kind of that mechanical scissor arm action. So what PrEP is for is used in labor and delivery. So it's a class 2 medical device used in the hospital. Although I will talk at the end about our visions for commercializing PrEP. So, as I mentioned, most women know that they don't want to tear, but they're not really thinking about the pelvic floor, the muscles themselves. So this part goes in the anatomy. So, and this is the handle and the battery. So as the cervix is dilating, so we're not doing anything to the cervix. A lot of times when people think dilation during labor and delivery, they think cervix. So we're not trying to speed up delivery. We're not trying to change what cervix is doing. She's doing her thing. But as it's dilating about 6 centimeters on the way to 10, the labor and delivery nurse would insert PrEP and just press go. This is partially dilated, so you can see it would be completely collapsed, but it takes an hour to dilate, so we don't have time for me to show you, but press go, and then it dilates a millimeter at a time, slowly over an hour. Very boring to watch. But what it does is do kind of a yoga stretch on the birth canal. so that, if you think about the cervix is slowly dilating. You know what? I'm going to show another picture because I feel like people don't know anatomy either. We get a lot of really interesting questions. So this is Materna Prep. Let me see if we can, here we go. So here's our little cartoon baby and our little cartoon cervix. So this is the cervix. The cervix stays closed all the time, except for when you're having a baby, and slowly dilates to about 10 centimeters, which is the average baby's head size. So you can see prep is not anywhere near the cervix, but it's doing this kind of yoga stretch on the birth canal. And so as mom's kind of resting in, usually with an epidural, but we don't think that it'll be necessary to have an epidural. We just have that as part of our clinical trial. So it's just really good science. Mom's not walking around.
Right, right.
But then it collapses and comes out, and those muscles stay stretchy for up to 3 hours. So then the idea is that that when the cervix opens, mom can get the baby out with one push, not having to go
Wow.
through all the resistance of her own pelvic floor.
So and this is so fascinating, Tracy. I'm so glad you showed the photo, and I'm so glad you said that last sentence, because I didn't know this actually, is the pelvic floor. And you said one push. So the difficulty in vaginal labors is literally the pelvic floor being so tight. That is
It's often the issue.
once the cervix is opened, then it's just women battling their own pelvic floors.
Right. And babies are getting bigger, but moms are not.
Right.
Women are having babies later where the tissues aren't as elastic, and we're living longer, right?
Right. So
So 100 years ago, we all died before menopause.
right. Which is
And
why
now we are.
yeah,
Yay.
yeah. Do you know Risa Kagan?
No, but please tell me.
I remember she spoke at one of the first women's health panels, and she was talking about exactly that and saying, we didn't have these issues in the past because women didn't live that long. And now, there is a huge market and a huge, hopefully more and more educators getting out there for, the 50 plus, the 47 plus, so that they can become aware of all of this, because we are living longer and we want to be able to promote women having healthy, happy sex until their 70s or 80s. There's no reason why they shouldn't be.
Right.
So, my goodness. Well, do you want to share some of the prep pilot data? Is that what
Yeah,
you wanted to talk about?
absolutely.
Because, so just to be clear, you audience, that product is not yet available, right? But
Not
it's
on the
that's
market.
profound. Are you guys the only ones in that space right now?
We are the only product in this space. It is here. I was sharing this earlier, but it's called a Denovo device. So we've met with the FDA. They have blessed our trial, which is ongoing. So for those folks in Houston, it is ongoing at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's, and Ben Taub. So for the Houston ladies, reach out, find out about the Materna Prep clinical trial. And we're just bringing up Marin Health here in the Bay Area. So for those who live in
Wow.
San Francisco, right? And UCLA is coming on board soon. So we're super excited. Those will be our 3 commercial launch cities. And we do think that, so this is a class 2 medical device. It's called a Denovo device, meaning there's nothing like it on the market. And I think it's really an exciting space to be working as a MedTech engineer. There are so many technologies that are me too, a better mousetrap, but to do something that really has never been done before is pretty exciting, especially in such a high volume space. I mean, childbirth is the #1 reason for hospitalization worldwide. Most hospitals have a whole building just for having babies,
Right.
right? So it's pretty exciting to be innovating in that space.
Hmm. And Tracy, talk about the trial and what were some of the rates of, well, it looks like here you've got a 60%
Yeah,
reduction in the
it
pelvic
was a
muscle
60%
injury.
reduction in pelvic muscle injury. And when we think about, so it's what we call in MedTech a surrogate endpoint, right? People don't think about their pelvic muscles, right? What they think about is incontinence and prolapse, right? So in the US alone, women spend $12 billion a year on incontinence.
Mm,
right? If we could reduce that by 60%, that would be worth something to the healthcare industry. It would be worth something to the women who live with it. The stories, so I have a lot of esteemed colleagues working in the incontinence space. So working on technologies to try to help women who've already been injured. Um, and the stories that they tell me are it's just devastating. These are the number one reasons for women being admitted into nursing homes in old age too, is
right, right. Yeah, one of our pelvic floor specialists mentioned that in her talk as well. Yeah, I was looking at your study that you gave me, and just to give the audience a couple of statistics, it says women who deliver vaginally, which you already talked about, are 5.5 times more likely to suffer from prolapse, vaginal organ prolapse, and 2.9 times more likely to have stress urinary incontinence than women who deliver with cesarean. And then it's estimated that 1 in 4 women suffer from any one of the main 5 disorders. So, which is that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, those numbers are actually conservative. I mean, there's a lot more data on there that shows up to 50%. And the incidence of these childbirth injuries are really intense.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And when we talk to, so we're a venture-backed company, when we talk to investors, um, I never get asked, is this really a thing? Like people know this is a thing.
Right.
The challenge is that there's been so little innovation in obstetrics, just so little innovation. Funny story, when I was working in orthopedics, no one ever asked me this question, but they do ask me now sometimes, who are we to interfere with Mother Nature?
Oh, interesting.
I just think it's so interesting. It's such a funny sort of societal blind spot, where we think about, I guess people think childbirth is this sort of mysterious thing and I was a non-interventionist mom. So when I had my kids, I did not want anybody to tell me how to do it. And I didn't want an epidural, and I didn't want any of those things. And so I'm very sympathetic with that perspective. And we see the prep technology as an empowerment,
Right.
not a intervention, right?
Well,
Giving mom a little bit more of a chance to try to have her own baby without hurting herself.
yeah. See, I look at it the same way. I'm all about natural, homeopathic, taking, being as much Mother Nature as you want, but also giving women a choice. And I probably have friends on both sides, that have a doula and have a doula massaging the pelvic floor, prior to the childbirth. And then
Mhm.
I have other women that are like, heck no, give me an epidural. I don't care. I want no pain. But those are the women that, you wouldn't want them to tear because they can't feel their body in the natural space saying, wait, wait, wait. So I love the empowerment piece. And I think for me personally, that's the beauty of MedTech. I am, I introduced you to Taylor Sittler, right? The CEO of
Yeah.
the Cusp. He's a big med tech guy. He himself is a big technology person. And I just love the space. And I think in this day and age, we've got to take advantage of if there are opportunities to give people choices that can help them, uh, you know, I-
Yep.
because this is injury prevention, right? It's
You
like
have
saying,
to have
I mean,
data.
I'm wearing a back brace right now because I've been in pain the last week, but I was like, I'm going to put this on to support my back during this interview so I'm in less pain. But that's my choice. I don't have to wear it.
Right.
So,
Right. But
yeah.
it really needs data, and I think that that's where there's been. I gave a keynote a couple of times this year, about the cycle of innovation in women's health and the ways that the cycle of innovation just in med tech, right? It involves patients talking to their doctors about what's not working. This doesn't feel good, doc. Can we fix it? That's a problem in women's health. Women don't talk to their doctors as much as they should about the things that aren't working for them. And so doctors don't know
Mhm,
that, I mean, so there's a lot of published data on the lack of communication. It's a very don't ask, don't tell kind of space.
mhm.
And then doctors need clinical data. I mean, ideally you say, doc, this doesn't feel good. And they say, oh, well, I just saw this data published on this new technology that can be helpful. And in women's health, so little gets funded. there's not that many women engineers and entrepreneurs. There's not that many women investors, only 93% of investors are men.
Oh, geez.
Right. So a lot of this is just, there's a lot of work to do. But we need women talking to their doctors. We need women in STEM. We need women investors. So there's some really great early stage funds that you can get involved in for pretty low entry amounts that'll teach you how to invest. We need women. The women have been coached to give their money away, not to invest it. And we need them to be investors.
Oh, I
Not
love that. I'm
charity.
going to have you come back and talk about your entrepreneurial life and how you have kind of pioneered in that space, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would want to hear that side of your story because it's important, right?
Yeah, money talks, right? We need women to be in the investor decision-making seats.
Hmm.
Yes,
Oh
we
my
do.
gosh, I already have a friend I'm going to call after this now. I'm going to share this interview with her directly. Um, well, Tracy, thank you so much. Do you have any parting words that you want to give? I mean, obviously you just gave incredible advice, which is if women don't talk to their doctors, that's the number one problem. We need women to speak up and say what's not working and what's working, right? Is there any other advice that you want to give people about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's related to the thesis here, which is to talk to your doctors about what's going on. But talk to your friends, don't I guess the thing that breaks my heart more than anything is how often our patients think they're the only ones, that they think they have something weird and fringy and unusual, and they don't. They're really normal. Millie's market size is the same as erectile dysfunction. We think it might even be bigger. So it's not, and here we have like baseball players on TV talking about their ED, right? Women need to claim that space too. It's not, you're not alone. It's not fringy. It's not weird. And we need to normalize the conversation so that we can get on with our lives and not suffer.
Right. Oh, I love that. What beautiful parting words. Well, again, thank you so much for the partnership and for all the work you do. I'm just so thrilled that you came and spoke today. And I can't wait when COVID's over to have an in-person forum with all the amazing doctors and entrepreneurs and med techs out there like yourself. I really, really appreciate your time and genius and just effort in the space.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's so important.
Okay, great.
All right,
We'll
happy
see you
holidays.
soon.
All right,
Okay,
take
bye,
care.
Tracy.